Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, as you know by now, we are on the road to Macworld iWorld 2013, talking to some of the exhibitors, speakers, the people that are going to make this the biggest and best Macworld iWorld ever. This time, I'm honored to have Alan Oppenheimer of Art Authority on. He is going to be giving a tech talk called Art Goes Digital. But Alan, I think it's only appropriate that we mention that you have a bit of a distinguished history with Apple itself.
That's true, I do. I was there quite a long time ago, almost another lifetime ago, working on the original Macintosh computer.
And you're being a little modest now. I won't push that. I'll just tell people to go to the show notes, and they'll see just how much you were involved in which projects in a pretty significant fashion. And it's very interesting to me, with all the history and all we've all read about the Macintosh and the motivations of the original Macintosh team and some of the subsequent teams, about how important art was in their thinking in those days. And now here you are, like you say, another lifetime later, giving a talk about art going digital.
Yeah, it's funny the way things work, that who would have thought that I'd end up being an actual art authority, which I now am in some respects, not in the classic sense, but in the modern day sense. And gone from working on internals of Apple's and the Mac's first network, to art that's seen by millions and millions and millions of people around the world. So it's been a long, strange trip.
I have to tell you, Alan, anytime the words art and Apple in the technology sense get brought up, there's so many ways that you look at this, and then you mix in the word digital, and it gets even more interesting. A lot of people think about the creation aspect. You are at least as much about the consumption, I guess, or appreciation of art in a digital fashion.
Yes, very, very much so. It's, as with every medium that's gone digital, there's sort of two sides to it. There's the creation and there's the distribution. So when you think of books, ebooks, you don't think so much of writing an ebook and publishing it, although people do that. You think of consuming it. Likewise, music, which is what started the revolution towards digital. Most of us listen to and consume music, don't create it. But some of us do. I've taken advantage of GarageBand and all that to create it. So photography, is mainly for creation. Video, you got both now. You obviously watched a lot of videos on your digital videos, but with YouTube, you create it. So art can go both ways too. And there is a modern day movement in art, which is digital art. Okay, there's a whole movement like Impressionism, and Romanticism and Surrealism, and now there's digital art. So there is a whole digital art movement. But what Art Authority is all about is the consumption, the appreciation, the distribution of art. Okay, and my talk, Art Going Digital, mainly focuses on distribution, not content creation. It certainly touches on content creation and the whole digital art movement within art. But mainly where we're involved and where the talk is about distribution and appreciation of art.
And is that distribution and appreciation of art that is digitally oriented, or is it more some of the classic kinds of art that we think of when you think of the Louvre or other great museums?
Exactly. It's almost all the classic art, from Roman times, Greek times, even Egyptian times, through Gothic, Byzantine, the Renaissance, of course, being huge, Baroque, Romanticism, Impressionism, and then into the more modern forms, like Cubism and abstract and et cetera, and all the way up to the very modern installation art. So it's the whole thing. People appreciate art, from start to finish. Similar to a lot of the other media, such as music, you've got your classic, your Beethovens and all that, and even earlier up through your, rap and et cetera. So art is the same way. Our apps are the same way. There are two main distinctions. Number one, right now we only do Western art. Okay, there's a whole nother world literally out there of Eastern art. Okay, it's not something we know enough about to even attempt to claim we're authorities of. Someday we would love to do an art authority East. Okay, but for now, art is Western for us. And the other second interesting distinction that I'm going to talk about extensively in the talk, because it's very relevant, is art that's under copyright versus art that's not under copyright. Okay, and that's a huge distinction. With music, we saw that 15 years ago when music started to go digital, and all the music industry was resistant. It was holding all the music like this. They had legal rights to do that because it was ultimately theirs to refuse to give out. Obviously, it was a mistake to do that, but they did. Art's a little different in that 80 or 90% of the classic art out there is in the public domain. Okay, it's very, very old. And so it belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't belong to the artist who created it. He or she's most likely dead. It doesn't belong to the museum in which the piece is sitting. Okay, they just literally own the piece itself, but not the content of the art. And it doesn't belong to anyone. There is now a distinction, however, that the more recent art, okay, the Andy Warhols of the world and whatever, or their estates, they have the copyright still. So there are issues, very, very significant issues around that very similar to music. All these media going digital, they all have the same issues over and over. And that's very, very interesting. And I'll be definitely talking about that.
And we could probably veer off here into about an hour conversation on copyright, the merits and the problems with it.
Right.
But do you think, let's just go down take one step down that road. Do you think that the fact that so much of this material is becoming digitally transferable or consumable is driving that? I mean, because there was a time that, okay, you could get a print or you could get a copy of a great painting, but you really can only access the great painting in one place, wherever it happened to be. With the digital medium, you can, I think at least, you can come a lot closer to experiencing that. Is that pushing some of the copyright issues that we're seeing?
Certainly, yes, as it did with music entirely. That it used to be you had to buy a CD or an LP or whatever, and yeah, if you had physical access, maybe you could make a bootleg tape of it, but it was much, much, much harder, and you had a much, much more limited selection. Okay. Whereas now, literally from anywhere around the world, you can literally access, any work of art or any medium of any sort, essentially. And so museums and artists are rightly concerned about losing control of their art, which is, if it's under copyright, it remains their art, and how it's displayed, how it's used, how it's monetized. They created it, they have the rights to do that, and they're rightly concerned. Now, whether they're addressing it in a reasonable, modern fashion, or they're making the same mistakes of the music industry is a good question.
Now we know how you feel about the music industry when you use the word mistakes.
It got fixed, though. Steve, in particular, thanks to Steve and Apple and a lot of other people, it got fixed, and now the music is really, really well done on the internet. So it took a little while, but it's pretty good now.
So you're trying to do something along those lines, at least for the accessible art, the art that is in the public domain, by making it even more available than maybe it is from a typical website of a museum or something dedicated to an artist or whatever.
Yeah, totally. That's where we're going. We want to create an iTunes of art. Okay, and I use that phrase in my talk. We want to create an iTunes of art, and that's both the public domain art, which is 80 to 90% of what's out there, and the under copyright art. We want to work with artists, and we are working with artists and such to include those in, other than just pulling them off their websites. Right now, our app, Art Authority, and our new Art Alert app, both of those do display and are a survey of all Western art. Okay, we felt it essential not to cut everything off at 1923 or whatever the magic cutoff date is, and all of a sudden, no, you can find all art back, but you can't forward. So the app does go out to authorized websites for the current day artists and just display their art off the website. But usually those are much lower quality and have other issues. So we want to work with the artists themselves or the artists' estates to actually license and get even better versions of that. And so our iTunes of art will be very, very similar to the iTunes of music, or video, in that it's going to have the old stuff, okay, but we want to have the new stuff too, and we want it to even be a place for new artists to even show off their wares, so to speak, just like iTunes. You can now, almost anyone can publish to iTunes, their music, and we want that to be through the iTunes of art as well. So we want to learn from, the good thing for us is that art is one of the last media to go digital. So we have a lot of advantage of history to understand the issues and to address them early on, and also guidance as to where we can really make a difference.
At the same time, I would think you have an immense set of challenges. At least with the music industry, there were some major players to go and talk to. With the art world, you don't quite have those major players, do you?
You actually do. For copyrighted art, in many, many cases, there are artist rights societies. Just as there were the big five in the record industry or whatever, there are, I believe, the big three that I'm aware of in the art industry. And so there are exceptions as well, such as a Picasso estate that's big enough to be off on its own. But that was the same like with the Beatles, right? They were off on their own, and it took Apple forever to get them. So there are always going to be exceptions. And it's sort of funny that the biggest artists are the ones who are going to be exceptions and often go digital last. It seems sort of backwards, but it's the way it works. But then a lot of modern artists have signed up with one of these three societies. And so talking to those is what we've been doing to some extent, and where we hope. It's very difficult, though. You're still right that it is a very, very difficult process, because every new industry has these large growing pains, and art's certainly not an exception to that. And as I said, a number of museums totally get it. There are a number of museums such as National Gallery of Art, the Getty down in LA, a number of foreign museums. They're putting all their artwork online in high res, without restrictions, at least the ones not under copyright. So they totally get it. But then there are other museums and artists who have the old-fashioned thinking of mine, and don't let anyone get it. So, and just like music.
How about the challenges that have to be associated? Now, you just sort of skipped over the fact that a lot of the museums are digitizing these things in high res, but that in itself has to be a huge issue. And there, in my mind, there would also be the issue that a lot of us have experienced just in our own homes or offices, where what was yesterday's high-res scan is not tomorrow's high-res scan. I mean, I just came back from CES where they're talking about 4K and even 8K televisions.
Yes, absolutely. So when we started this business, when we started with apps, we had the iPhone. This is a 5, it's a Retina display, but it had half this resolution, right? The first one. And then we went to the original iPad, just back there, and now we've got the Retina display, right? So we have had to deal with that as well. And so, when we first started, most of our RET scans were that we would find or do, or however we get them, would be about 1K on the bigger side, 1024 by whatever it worked out to. Now with the iPad, with the Retina display, first the iPad, then the iPad Retina display, now we're going up to 2560 on one side. Okay, that's 2.5 times bigger on one side. You have to square that. And so that ends up over 6 times bigger than we started out. So, and what's going to happen 5 years from now, right? The super hyper Retina double-digit display, it's going to be a whole other set of issues, let alone displaying it on a Mac Retina display or a 4K TV sometime. I mean, it is going to be an ongoing challenge.
And I guess there's just no other way around it, because we see the same thing in music. You take the things from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you can only get out as much as was originally put in. I guess the good news for you is that as long as these pieces still physically exist, the scans or whatever can constantly be upgraded if the demand and the affordability is there.
Right. Although it is a very, very, very expensive process. So to do an actual redigitalization of a classic work of art that's hanging on a wall in a major museum, would be very, very difficult. But it's certainly, it is possible. And like, as you say, a recording from the 30s or 40s, you're stuck with whatever was used at that point.
Alan, you say, talking about the iTunes of art, will this just be strictly for consumption, as in I want to see the Mona Lisa, so I go to your store, I click the Mona Lisa, and there it is? Or will it be a situation where I can buy a digital download to print or order professionally done prints, or what?
Plus, you can do almost everything you said now, actually, through our Art Authority app. Okay, so right now, and it's best on the iPad, but it runs on a Mac, great. It runs on an iPhone. You can view 60,000 works of Western art by name, by title, by period, by subject, by location of the actual museum it's in. You can view that all right now. You can, for a select set of mainly highlights, you can order a print right now. Okay, and we had an alliance with the Bridgman Art Library, which, by the way, has been doing this for over 40 years. Whereby you can order prints, and we're also working with a local company to do the physical printing, framing, and shipping. Okay, so again, you can do that right now. We would love to branch out into T-shirts, mugs, hats, you name it. There are sites that will do that. You can create a whole store on Zazzle and a couple others. Right now, again. So that's nothing. It's really what's going to be in the future. Okay. 3D sculptures, right? Walking around the David, right? Because our app has a number of pictures of the David, okay, but in Florence, but there's no way you can do that justice, okay. So so that's one thing, and there's just so much. We haven't even started talking about education here yet, right? That the iPad is already revolutionizing education in a generic sense, but specifically art and art history. Can you imagine anything more suited to an iPad than something like that, where right now you have, $500 and 50 pounds worth of art books per June, that has 100th the amount of art that our app does. Okay, so art education is going to be, huge. And again, you said the store, iTunes, the ability of up and coming artists to publish their art, through an iTunes of art, as opposed to having to, I don't even know how you do it, work with very expensive galleries in New York City or Paris, to make any headway. That could be incredibly enabling. And it just goes on and on. When things go digital, magic just happens.
As you're speaking, I'm sort of cycling back to the earlier part of the discussion where you said you've had the opportunity to learn from so many other mediums that have done this. We're doing one of them right now. The democratization of video and audio communications and sharing these kind of interviews, and so you have learned a lot. But boy, it also seems like you're still facing a lot of challenges just because of the sheer volume and diversity of the topic you've decided to pick.
Absolutely. And plus, we're a little tiny company. Okay, when Steve did this with music, he had all of Apple Computer behind him, plus his reality distortion field, right? I don't, I don't have a team of lawyers. I don't have an aura about me, So when I go and talk to these artists or whatever, and we have artists call us and get in contact with us, and that's gratifying to know we're getting out there. But when I talk to them, it's like, well, who are you and what's Art Authority? So it's a huge challenge, and we can't do it by ourselves. Actually, we hope to find some partners to help us out. We're actively looking for, there are actually a number of funded startups in this area already. We're looking at that option. We have to get a lot bigger to make the difference that I think we can make.
And again, having looked at Art Authority, having looked at Art Authority, the difference you're already making is amazing, because now, as you said, I can have thousands and thousands of pieces of art right on my iPad to consume, and I especially want to go back and get to the education piece. This suddenly makes art in a world where, and at least in our society, where we're starting to see art and certain other disciplines seem to be devalued in our educational system. This makes it a lot more affordable to keep it up and make it just that much more accessible.
Oh, no question about it. We've worked extensively with Seton Hill University. They use it in all their classes. We work with a program in California called the Art Docent Program for K through 7. We've come out with a K through 12 version of the app based on teacher demand that they just can't handle nudity, that teenagers just can't handle nudity for whatever reason. And it's just getting started. I mean, we have an iBook. You know, you can imagine, you know, so we'd love to write a full textbook. We started out with a fairly basic iBook, but just that with all the magic animations and pictures and movies, you know, that makes a huge difference, the interactivity. Yeah, so right now, I think we sell more into the consumer space and the education space, but 10 years from now, it's going to be, education will be huge and consumer will be huge too, but education will be huger, I think. So it's going to, that's where we're going to make the most difference, I think. A related thing is museums. You know, that they have a, you know, they're mainly they have a large educational component. So that's our new Art Alert app. You know, that I like to say that Art Authority brings, as you said, all this great art to people. Okay, Art Alert brings people to great art. So it's to get people to, you know, if they have the accessibility to a real museum, to be able to get to it, if they're traveling, to be able to find the great art, you know, when they're in Paris, when they're in Rome, you know, when they're in London, when they're in LA, when they're in New York. So it goes, you know, that whole museum education aspect is a big subpart of that.
You clearly have a passion for it, and the more we talk, the more it opens my eyes to just how many opportunities there are for something like this. That I guess we get locked into our world of websites and iPhone and iPad apps and don't always think about the bigger picture and where we can go. And of course, as a member of the original Mac team, that doesn't surprise me that you would be doing some of this.
Yeah, it's similar in that, you know, back then it was like wide open. You know, the field of computing was just starting to crawl along, and you could like see all this future potential, but you weren't sure you were going to get to it all. And then there was potential beyond that you couldn't even see yet. So it's sort of the same thing that we can definitely see all this future potential, and it will happen. You know, the only question will be how involved will we be and how, you know, details of that direction. But this is all happening with or without us. But then the stuff beyond it that you can't even imagine yet, you know, to some extent that's cooler even than what we see. What we don't see is even cooler than what we do see.
Alan, we've hit a lot of topics here, and this may be a fair question, it may not. Who should come and attend your tech talk? Obviously someone with an interest in art, but any other particular audiences you hope to reach with this tech talk?
Yeah, I would say anyone who is interested in any digital medium. You know, so if you're into digital music, if you're into digital video, if you're into photography, you know, if you're into ebooks, you know, because it's important to understand this is all part of the same movement, you know, and inspired and enabled by two things, the computer and the internet. And, you know, it just gives, I love the insight of understanding all the industries to understanding one in the industry. And obviously there are details that are different and you can't make the mistake of cookie cuttering them. But I think, you know, any sort of digital medium, you should show up, you know, any sort of, if you're a traveler, I mean, people who travel, you know, there are a few who will only go and fish, you know, or whatever, but most of them, you know, end up in big cities and will want to check out, you know, some museums and have some appreciation. And that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback we get is how great our app is to help with the real world art appreciation, you know, before you go, after you go. And that's in fact why we created Art Alert, because we got so much feedback about Art Authority being so useful when you go to a real museum that we created an app just for going to real museums.
Again, it's the future's wide open here, and you're positioning yourself to take advantage of it and be a leader. I certainly hope it continues to work out as well as it has with Art Authority, and now I've got to go check out Art Alert too.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you know, come by our booth, talk with us, tell us what you'd like to see, tell us what works, tell us what doesn't work, tell us where you think things are going, you know, because I have an original idea on rare occasions, but usually it's just someone who has triggered something in my mind or even just told me something, and and we go off and implement it. We're great implementers, and we have a little bit of vision as well. But most of these things come from outside. So we love people to come by, come by the booth and say hi and shoot the breeze with us. I'll be there. My partner Jim Teese, who you mentioned, will be there, and some of the staff will be there, and it would just be great to talk to people.
And I want to make sure we differentiate this. The Art Authority will have a booth on the show floor, and we're also talking about your personal tech talk. When is the tech talk scheduled?
My tech talk, which is Art Goes Digital, is on the first day of the show, which is Thursday, January 31st, and it's at 1 p.m.
Great. So taste the show floor, get some lunch, and then go see Alan, because this promises to be a fascinating talk. Alan, you want to give us a quick listing of websites that folks should check out before the talk or before the show?
Sure. We'll just go to artauthority.net. Okay, that is our website for everything Art Authority related. One of the cool things, actually, I'd like to mention two cool things we haven't even really talked about. One of this is that potential, right? We talked about internet, computers, social networks. Okay, that's a really big up and coming thing. Okay, and once you have a medium digitized, sharing on a social network, a la photos, a la movies, whatever on Facebook, becomes very, very easy. And so artauthority.net is more than just a website for all the Art Authority apps. It actually includes a community website that we hope to ultimately be the go-to place for art, discussions about art, community art, and so artauthority.net is that. And just another cool thing I want to mention is the Art Authority intern program. We talked about education, and last summer we had, about 30 interns who were getting amazing experience. Right? If you're an art history major and you get to work on an app, that's pretty darn cool. And so we hope to do that again this summer. So you can check that out on the site as well. But again, artauthority.net is pretty much everything Art Authority.
Great. And congratulations on doing an intern program. That's even better to get the younger people involved in this kind of thing, both from an appreciation standpoint and just an involvement standpoint to start kindling those passions.
And it's a win-win because we get a lot out of it, both in terms of improvements to the app, but just those fresh ideas, that fresh viewpoint, that's worth just doing the program just for that.
Alan, I'd love to have you come back and talk about some of these other things. The idea of art and social networks is you say it, and I start to see a lot of things we could talk about. So maybe we could do that sometime after the show.
That would be great. I'd love to do that.
Terrific. Folks, that's Alan Oppenheimer of Art Authority. Come and see his tech talk on, the first day of the show, Thursday at 1 p.m. For now, you'll have to deal with this much of him and go see him live and get even more. Alan, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Folks, Alan's going to be in San Francisco at Macworld, iWorld. We hope to see you there too. If you are going to, continue to watch The Road to Macworld. And if not, we'll do our best to give you a taste of the show once we all get there. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for listening. MacVoicesTV is part of the MacVoices Group at MacVoicesGroup.com. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.